On Thursday, Labour took a shellacking from the voters. On Friday, the Prime Minister took responsibility for his mistakes. His answers to voters who said we've had enough of Starmer. On Saturday, he said that what we need is yet more Starmer. 10 more glorious years, apparently. The smart money says that the Prime Minister won't be winkled out of Downing Street, but the vultures are circling. Over at Reform headquarters, they're celebrating their win. But now comes the hard bit. They have to actually do the job. It may all be academic, of course. In Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast, the leaders want to say goodbye to London. For a rather embattled government, I'll be joined by Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. And for a buoyant Reform UK, Deputy Leader Richard Tice. Also with us, the SNP's Stephen Flynn. And the man due to be the next First Minister of Wales, Victoria's Plaid Cymru leader, Rhys Iorwerth. As well as the Conservatives' James Cleverly. Plus, with us throughout the show, editor of The Spectator and former Secretary of State, Michael Gove. Host of the Politics at Sam and Anne's podcast, Anne McElvoy. And chief political commentator of The Times, Patrick Maguire. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Dick Tuck, a famous American political prankster, sort of Sacha Baron Cohen, once ran for a seat in the California State Senate. On election night, he looked at the votes piling up, realized he was going to take a hammering, and famously told his team, "The people have spoken, the bums." Except that he used a word to describe the voters that referred to their parentage, far too rude for breakfast telly. On May the 7th, the British people did speak, and they were brutal. They gave Nigel Farage a fighting force of nearly 1,500 councillors. They boosted Zach Polanski's ranks by getting on for another 500. They put leaders in Edinburgh and Cardiff who ultimately want to break up the UK. What they said to Sir Keir Starmer was unambiguous. "We think your government is a massive letdown. We really can't see the point of your party. And what's more, we really don't like you very much either." As we come on air, the Labour Party is in chaos, with a backbencher, Catherine West, threatening to trigger a leadership contest, and several of Starmer's cabinet ministers jostling to replace him. The Prime Minister is going to respond tomorrow in what we're promised is a major speech. To rescue his leadership, he'll need something a bit more persuasive than his initial response on Friday morning, which amounted to, "Yes, I made mistakes, the biggest of which is not to tell people frequently enough and loudly enough that everything I've done is right." It's quite hard to imagine voters in Barnsley or Hartlepool or Thurrock, where Labour was swept away by Reform, turning to their friends and crying, "If only I'd known they'd bring back Gordon Brown and Harriet Harman, I'd definitely have voted for Keir instead of Nigel." The Prime Minister's signalling frantically that he plans to keep going. He talked about being set for a 10-year run. But for all the stirring words and the bravado, this weekend he seems to me, and to many others, to be a man who is not waving, but drowning. Let's get a view from the government bunker to start with this morning. A little earlier, I spoke to the Education Secretary. Bridget Phillipson, the London MP, Catherine West, says that unless the Cabinet gets itself together and nominates a replacement for the Prime Minister by tomorrow, she's going to trigger a leadership contest. So when are you having the meeting?
Catherine is a great colleague, and I've known her a long time, and I have real respect for Catherine. On this one, I do part company with her. I think she's got this completely wrong. What I do recognise, however, is that Catherine, like lots of other colleagues and like lots of candidates who stood in the elections that we've just had, are really hurting this morning. And I feel that too. You know, Friday morning, I felt absolutely sick to the bottom of my stomach about the scale of the defeat that we'd suffered. And we got a real kicking from the voters. There's no escaping that. And we have to reflect seriously on that. And, you know, we have to reckon with what we need to do as a party now to turn it around. I don't think, however, a leadership contest and all of the problems that would bring is the answer. So I disagree with her, but I do recognise the real hurt that lots of people are facing, good people, and you know, who lost their seats across the country and who had, you know, served their communities, worked incredibly hard, but because of the national picture.
I want to unpack all of that, but let's just deal with what's happening this morning. Are you confident Catherine West won't be able to assemble 80 MPs to trigger a leadership contest? And if she does, what are you going to do about it?
I don't think that will happen, but I think, in a sense, that's almost besides the point, because whilst I disagree with what Catherine is doing, I do understand the worry, the hurt, the pain that people are feeling, and therefore actually turning that around, demonstrating to not just the party but to the country that this country is moving in the right direction, that we can have a more hopeful future. That was the message that I heard on the doors in my community and across the country.
But what we're hearing this morning is, and I know we don't want to get too bound up in process, but the truth is, if 80 MPs sign up to her cause, then you are in a leadership contest. Are you sure you can just brush it aside? I mean, this could be chaos.
But I'm not brushing it aside, far from it. And whilst I recognise how people feel at the moment, and I share that because we had a really, really difficult set of elections. I mean, that would be to put it mildly. So I'm under no illusions as to the scale of what lies ahead of us.
So what are you saying to your colleagues who will tomorrow morning, by the sound of it, going to be getting a message from her saying, will you put your name on my leadership bid? What's your message to those colleagues?
So what I would say is, you know, I've knocked on doors right across the country and in my own community, as colleagues will have done too, and as party members will have done as well. And what I heard was not a desire for a leadership contest of the Labour Party to spend more time talking amongst ourselves. What I heard loud and clear from voters was their deep sense of frustration that they'd voted for change in 2024. They were hopeful that that change would be delivered, and they don't feel that we as a party or we as a Labour government have delivered what they wanted. So I think the last thing that, in response to that, is to say, let's have an extended period of time arguing amongst ourselves. I don't think that would be the right response. And just to give one example, Trevor, of one conversation that really stayed with me, one door I knocked on in my community in Sunderland on Thursday. And the woman I spoke to had been a lifelong Labour voter, so she'd voted Labour in every election, and this was the first election where she was seriously thinking about whether or not to vote Labour. She had lots to say about the last Tory government, a lot of it a bit sweary, and I won't share it this morning.
Yeah, it's breakfast time.
But she recognised the scale of the challenge that we inherited as a government. But she said, look, you've had almost 2 years now. Why does it not feel better? And that's what we've got to address. And her big concern was around social housing and around a family friend who was living in overcrowded accommodation. Now, I could say to her, and I did, we're investing more in social housing, we're going to build more, but people want to see that change more quickly. That's the challenge that we have to rise to. If we then spend months focusing on the Labour Party, not building houses and delivering the change that people did want to see in 2024, I think that would be a huge and profound mistake.
That's really interesting. What did she have to say about Keir Starmer?
Didn't come up.
Seriously? Keir Starmer did not come up on the doorstep with somebody who was engaged?
Genuinely, sincerely, no. Now, I'm not saying that Keir Starmer's leadership did never come up, but actually not as much as people might imagine. What did come up a lot was policing, GP appointments, why are waiting lists coming down faster? All of the things that really genuinely do matter. And of course leadership matters, but leadership is about a Prime Minister, but it's about all of us as a government, all of us as a party, demonstrating that we are delivering on the change that people voted for.
I want to get on to policy, but I just want to ask you one more thing in this whole area. Do you have a message for those people who are regularly named as potential candidates? Mr Streeting, Ms Rayner, Mr Burnham, what should they be saying today? What do you want them to say?
Look, they don't need a message from me. I think
they do.
They really don't. In 2024...
OK, but you would like... They are in the spotlight. They're in the spotlight. What should they be doing? If you want people not to be doing, what Catherine West is doing, surely the people at the centre of this should have something to say.
So the responsibility that all of us have, whether we are in the Cabinet, whether we are in government or as members of Parliament, is a really big responsibility. Labour governments don't come around very often, and we have an enormous opportunity to turn our country around, to demonstrate the power of government in people's lives at a moment where people are really questioning whether things can get better. I am genuinely hopeful and optimistic about the future of our country. I believe our best days lie ahead of us. It is incumbent on all of us, not just to say that, but to deliver on that promise at a point at which people are really questioning whether politics can deliver. And I think at a point that is really perilous for our country, and at a point where, you know, we're nigh on 2 years into this parliamentary term. We do have another 3 years to deliver the change that people... That doesn't take away from the kicking that we got on Thursday, but we have a unique opportunity. And were it not for the election of a Labour government in 2024, we would not be lifting thousands of children out of poverty in my community and across the country. But clearly the story that we're telling, the message that we're giving, is not cutting through, and it is not persuading people. Well, and that is the challenge that we have to rise to.
Well, maybe one way of beginning to cut through, get people to listen to you again, is to demonstrate that you've understood what they've said. Prime Minister on Friday morning said this, and it was very interesting. He said he had made mistakes, he himself. Yeah. What was his biggest mistake?
We've had a few. I think the one that I feel caused us real damage early on, I suppose two things, and they are connected. Firstly, the decision we made around the winter fuel allowance, right to target it on those who need it most, but we went too far, and that caused us huge, huge problems. I think alongside that, I think we were too gloomy and too negative early on. People knew the country was in a mess. They didn't need us to remind them in such detail that the country was in a mess. And whilst it's right that we pin all of those problems on 14 years of Tory government, people voted for change for a reason. They didn't want to hear about that. They wanted us to focus on what we as a government were going to deliver. So, and I think those two things are linked. But I do think that those early mistakes embedded a sense of gloom when actually we have a unique opportunity to deliver a better future for our country, and we still have that opportunity. We've got time on our side. That doesn't take away from the hurt that people are feeling at the moment, and I feel it. But let's think about what we can achieve together.
Can I just say, you've been admirably clear about the mistakes, winter fuel allowance, that you were too gloomy. You and your colleagues were coming in here every week saying how terrible everything was. I think that's very clear. One thing that struck me was that the Prime Minister, when he said this, he said, we were right to level with the public about the scale and depth of the challenges we face. We were right to be gloomy, basically. And he said we didn't do enough to convince them that things will get better. There's something about the way he put that made me think of people in interviews who say, that when they're asked what their biggest weakness is, they say, I was just too perfect. He says, my mistake was that we were just too honest. Why couldn't he just have said what you've just said?
Well, I think he was. I think that's what he was. I think that's what he was getting at.
Saying what you've just said.
I think that's.
And he doesn't say it.
I think that's what he was. The Prime Minister was getting at, which is, it was right that we levelled with the British people about the scale of the challenge. But you know, to the conversation I had with the lady on the doors in Sunderland, she then said, "That's fine, I get that, but what are you doing about it?"
Isn't that part of your problem, that he communicates in this way that doesn't say things in a way that you, literally, in the last 3 minutes, have said? You were clear. Winter fuel allowance, big mistake. We were too miserable. He goes, oh, we were too honest. Isn't that your problem?
I don't think that's quite what he was saying. But what I would say is that Keir is someone who I am proud is leading our country through a very unstable world with all of the volatility and the challenges that we face. He recognises, as we all do, that we need to deliver what we promised to people in 2024, and that right now, what we're doing, we're not making that argument as well as we should. He knows that, and I know that.
All right, look, his first big demonstration that things are going to change is to announce the appointment of Gordon Brown and Harriet Harman as his advisors. Now, I don't want to be rude, and these two individuals are people I've known a long time. They're my friends. They're very serious individuals. But how can I put this? They're both even older than I am. I mean, is this the answer to the problem that you saw on Thursday? I mean, if Harriet and Gordon are the answer, maybe you're asking yourselves the wrong question.
You shouldn't do yourself down there, Trevor, but they are both tremendously talented people, and they're people I've worked with closely in different ways in my time in government and long before, and they've got a lot to offer. But of course, this is one part. This is one part.
Backward-looking.
This is one part of it. We've got the King's Speech coming up just next week, and a big and ambitious programme of change for our country.
Would have said was saying yesterday, oh my goodness me, if I had known that they were going to bring in Harriet Harman and Gordon Brown, I would have, I wouldn't have voted for Farage, I would have voted for Keir.
But two of the big challenges we face as a country is violence against women and girls, but also around the cost of living, around the global challenges that we face. And Gordon Brown is someone I've worked with really closely on tackling child poverty, for example. So he's got a lot to offer. Both he and Harriet have got a lot to offer. But this is only one part of what we're seeking to do. We've got a big and ambitious programme we're going to bring forward in the King's Speech.
Well, let's talk about what might be in that programme. If I can step through some of my issues quickly. On Europe, you've had these three red lines: no customs union, no free movement, no single market. Are those three red lines still inviolate?
Well, we definitely need a closer relationship with Europe. It's clear to me that Brexit has caused our country untold damage, has massively hit people in terms of the cost of living and their living standards. And the big cost that we face as a country is that we spent 10 years talking about our relationship with the European Union rather than focusing on things that really matter. It paralysed government, and it paralysed our country. I understand
the landscape, but I just asked you what you're going to do, and I asked you if the red lines were still inviolate, and I'm not hearing the word no.
So we hold to what we said in our manifesto, but we do need a closer relationship with Europe. I'm absolutely clear about that. I want young people in Sunderland, across the country, to enjoy all of the benefits that come of being able to work, travel and study in Europe. They've seen their opportunities closed down, their horizons narrowed, and equally businesses have found it really hard to export, to do business, and that's had a big hit on living standards. It's had a big hit on our economy. And we've got to be bold and ambitious in driving forward with closer ties with our European partners.
You're telling me what's wrong, but I understand there's no change there. Immigration. The former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, says that the actions of Shabana Mahmood on immigration are, quote, un-British. Are you going to persist with her plan to make it more difficult to settle?
So the precise nature of those measures was subject to consultation, but it is right that we take action on immigration. It is also right that we demonstrate to the public that not only can we control the borders, we control who lives in our country. Immigration has always been an important part of our country's story, but it's a necessary precondition for governing. It's a necessary precondition for government that you control your borders and you demonstrate fair. No, we are committed to ensuring that we have fairness and control where it comes to our immigration policy. That is what people expect, and it's what we will deliver. But that is not in conflict with our clear and long-standing position that we recognise the benefits of immigration alongside having to make sure that in order to allow for those benefits to be felt, you have to demonstrate to people that you have to demonstrate to people that you can control the system fairly if you want to maintain public confidence.
The only reason I'm trying to interrupt you is that I understand all of that, but I'm asking you a specific question about what's going to change. And thus far, on Europe, on immigration, you're not telling me anything's going to change. On welfare, two-child cap, any change there?
Well, there was definitely a big change, and I'm glad, because we're going to lift 500,000 children out of poverty. Yeah,
but you're not going to resign on that. The point is, the Prime Minister's been saying for the last 3 days, I hear you, I get it, we are going to change. I've now asked you about the three of the biggest issues facing the government, and what I'm getting is nothing's going to change.
Look, the wrong message to take from the elections that we've just had would be that people want us to change tack.
I want to know whether when the Prime Minister says he's going to change, what is going to change? Nothing on the big policies is going to change.
Look, part of the frustration that people feel about the state of our country is a failure of government to have a system that works for them. That is what has to change. And a part of that is around immigration. Look,
so what does that mean?
Hang on.
Well, what does it mean? No, you're giving me a lot of words, but what does it mean?
Right, I have always believed that you have to have a system, a fair system, one that recognises the benefits but has clear controls alongside it. That is the system that we are going to deliver. That is not the system that we have at the moment. That's part of the reason that people feel government isn't working for them. It's part of the answer. It's not part of the problem.
Nobody's going to argue it would be good if government worked. You're just not telling me how you're going to make it work.
I just did. So on immigration, you're saying to me, are we going to change approach? This is a change. Because
it's the same approach we had on Wednesday.
It is not. It changed from what has gone before in the years running up to this. Okay? Where we didn't have control over our borders, where people felt the impact of immigration was too strong, where those numbers changed very, very rapidly. Look, I've always been a supporter, and I remain, of our diverse country and all of the benefits that come with immigration. But we can only deliver that if we maintain public confidence in that system. What we will not do, what we will not do, however, is move to the divisive approach that we see from the likes of Reform. We, as the Labour Party, are the only party that can bring our country together. We don't want to see that fragmentation. We don't want to pit communities and regions against each other. Yes, but you have...
I'm trying very hard to stick to the time that you've given us.
Part of the argument is how you make the case for what you want as well as for the policy. Yes, the policy, but also the argument and the story we tell. And we have not told that story effectively. And we have allowed others, like Reform, to make the case for a negative and backward-looking country, not a country with a hopeful future ahead of us. And that's what we've got to convince people of.
If you're not going to change the policy, can you change the people? Will there be a reshuffle?
I'm not aware that there will be a reshuffle, but those are, of course, matters for the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister says this morning in one of the newspapers that he is looking forward to a 10-year run. Keir Starmer, Prime Minister for 10 years. Let's not even discuss whether that's realistic, but is that desirable? Was that something you think is a good idea? 10 years?
What Keir was talking about was a decade of national renewal, which is something we've talked about on many occasions previously.
Not necessarily him.
Because the scale of what's in front of us is not going to be fixed in one parliamentary term. We'll go faster. We've got to do more. But some of these challenges are really big and deep and profound, and they have not emerged in the last couple of years. But understandably, voters want to see change faster. So take, for example, the big challenges around educational underperformance across our country.
We've heard that. Look,
that is not going to be fixed overnight, but where we've got a clear plan with more of what I'm announcing today to address those deep-rooted challenges in communities like the North East and in our coastal towns.
Let me just ask you one last question. If he's not going to be here for 10 years, will Keir Starmer lead you into the next general election, and do you want him to lead you into the next general election?
Yes, on both counts.
Bridget Phillipson, thank you so much for your time this morning. Well, let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the editor of The Spectator and former Secretary of State, Michael Gove, the host of the Politics at Sam and Anne's podcast, Anne McElvoy, and the chief political commentator of The Times, Patrick Maguire. Patrick, you're the resident expert on the Labour Party. What did you make of that?
I think there, Trevor, in a nutshell, is the problem the Cabinet has and the government and the Labour Party have more broadly. You have Bridget Phillipson there being strikingly honest about everything that Keir Starmer has done wrong, but unable to say so bluntly. You know, saying that Labour's first months in government have been a disaster in terms of what they were communicating to the country and doing to the country, yet unable to say what everybody in this government knows and what everybody in the Labour Party knows, which is the problem is the Prime Minister. And also what struck me throughout that interview was the recurrence of the phrase, what Keir was saying was. You know, we're still in the place where even now the Prime Minister is the person who is least able to communicate what the Prime Minister supposedly means. Right now, what Keir was actually saying was that, and it's invariably described more fluently, more compellingly. And Bridget Phillipson had a Weetabix this morning by literally anybody else but the Prime Minister. And I think that is a big, big problem for a leader who is trying desperately to reclaim some sense of initiative and moral authority over his party.
Maybe there are going to be subtitles under the Prime Minister to what the Prime Minister is really saying in this reset speeches. I thought the difficult area also for Bridget Phillipson was that 10 years quote, that the Prime Minister gave, pretty
She swallowed it with anxiety.
Yes,
at the
yes, I
prospect.
thought there was a little... We've all known on a television screen, when you just hear something, it's like, I'm sorry, what?
I thought she was going to break out the bunting at that point.
I don't think she did look at all like she wanted the bunting out at that point, because I think she is smart, Bridget Phillipson. I think her analysis, really, of the weaknesses of the Prime Minister are pretty clear from the way that she tries, in this meta language, to say, no, hang on, this is what we're really doing. But she did say we haven't communicated it well. So there is that. If that is the case, why do you want 10 more years of it? And I think that brings you to this big question about Keir Starmer. If he's saying, on the one hand, I take responsibility for these terrible results, I think other cabinet members have been more sympathetic to councillors who lost their seats and to their supporters. Keir Starmer didn't want to go too much into that because that would be back on him. But then it's like, I'm really sorry this has gone so badly, so I'm staying for 10 years. I mean, I would love to say that at my workplace. It's like, I'm really sorry I messed this up, but can you give me another decade? It just sounds like a bit of hubris, and I think that's the problem.
Michael, what did you take from what Bridget had to say?
Well, she made, as both Anne and Patrick have said, Keir Starmer's case far better than Keir Starmer ever could. I was left thinking maybe Bridget Phillipson might well be a leadership candidate in a few days' time. It is almost impossible now to make the case. When you ask the question about the 10-year run, most people at home would have burst out laughing. They'll think that Keir Starmer is scarcely capable of a 10K run in the next week. The dead man running.
Cracky, he worked on that one.
No, I was observing what you were asking.
I'm talking about the Labour Park run and what it would look like.
But it's a run into a cul-de-sac or run into a brick wall. Anyway, enough metaphor. The reality is that the scale, as you pointed out right at the top of the programme, of Labour's defeat requires a reset, not necessarily a change of leader, though that's probably likely, but it requires a reset far more comprehensive than any cabinet minister is capable of articulating on a Sunday morning, while Keir Starmer is still in the state of denial he clearly occupies.
It's hard to see what he's going to do. I mean, because I genuinely wanted to know if there was any thought, Anne, about what a change might be. And Bridget Phillipson didn't seem even really to be interested in the idea of a change in immigration policy or any of that.
Well, especially saying our fundamentals are sound. We try to be a bit fair on Labour because it's easy not to be at the moment. We've got our fundamentals in place, so we've effectively moved our position from a kind of wishy-washiness about asylum and immigration to saying we can only have these benefits of diversity if we have more control, and that is seen by the voters. That was previously something more of a right-of-centre position, but I think it would be fair to say that the government has moved there. Whether it's able to action it is another matter.
It's going to be quite difficult when Angela Rayner's saying that doing what Shabana Mahmood wants to do is un-British.
Well, Angela Rayner isn't at the moment. Let's see. Well, if Angela Rayner's got to then put up, hasn't? If that's what she wants to do, then she has to come out fighting, and it's possible that Shabana Mahmood might fight back. But the other thing that I think she was referring to, again, it was quite wishy-washy, but what she was trying to trail, I think, is this pro-European reset, which I'll be sort of writing about tomorrow, because I'm also in a news media group that is also circulates a lot in Germany, which is like, are you really going to say, after you've had all those problems in Brexit-leaning parts of Britain, that your solution is to move closer to the EU? But it does appear that that's what the Prime Minister wants to say in part.
Talking about the benefits of diversity and then the importance of management, that's the sort of thing that we Tories did 10, 12 years ago. Britain has moved on. In a society as polarised as ours, with violence on the streets, as we saw in Golders Green last week, that sort of rhetoric just doesn't cut it. And then the idea that the Labour government's first response to losing Wigan and Wakefield and Barnsley to reform is to say, we're going for the European Union. We're going to revive a campaign to take us into the EU. I mean, honestly, if Labour believe that repeating the multiculti bromides of the first decades of this century and uniting behind a pro-EU message is going to save them, then the situation is even worse than it appears from these results.
Patrick, it's almost impossible ever to understand the Labour Party and its rules, but just give it a go. What happens now with the Catherine West business and so on.
Well, there's a common misconception that Catherine West needs 80 MPs, 81 MPs to be able to kick this process off. She doesn't. She merely needs to tell Labour's National Executive Committee on Monday, I want to challenge Keir Starmer. And of course, she knows she's not going to challenge Keir Starmer. It's unlikely she'll get 81 MPs, though some people who aren't outwardly seditious or baying for blood think she might, such as the scale of anger on the backbenches. But why her intervention really matters is it gives people a pretext to say this is going to happen anyway, I haven't wielded the knife. So the two people who really matter in the next 24 hours are Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner. Because Wes Streeting has always said, I am planning, but I am not plotting. I am not going to be the one who wields the knife in the hope of seizing the crown. There are lots of very agitated, wound-up people around Wes Streeting who will be spending today and will have spent last night saying to him, you have got to do this, you've got to move, you've got, unlike Bridget Phillipson or anybody else, a good story to tell about the local elections in your patch. You know, there's been lots of gloomy rhetoric about Wes Streeting's chances of maintaining his hold on Ilford, but Labour's losses were very, very small. Only lost 3 councillors in his patch. And then, what does Angela Rayner do? What has Angela Rayner said? What's Angela Rayner going to say? She's maintained a Trappist silence over the past 48 hours. But we could very easily see, in the next 24 hours, a chain of events set in train that in turn will, you know, if you look up to Greater Manchester, will make Andy Burnham despair. Because the message from those who have called for the Prime Minister to go is orderly transition, please, timetable, please, which is code for, can we just hang on until Andy gets back? But if Wes Streeting goes, Angela Rayner goes, and all bets are off.
What do you think they're going to do, Patrick? You know these people.
Look, you never lose money betting on the Cabinet to bottle it, this Cabinet in particular, and for the Labour Party to do nothing. The example, Wes Streeting, who was taken to calling himself a revisionist, that forgotten word from the Labour right tradition, he's got to remember the example of Roy Jenkins in 1968, again, after a deeply awful set of local election results for Labour, particularly in London, you know, where they were all but wiped out. Roy Jenkins was surrounded by lots of clever people who said, this is your moment. We hate Harold Wilson. We're going to be walloped in the 1970 election if you don't move. Roy Jenkins didn't move. The people around him concluded, well, this guy's a dilettante. He's not a serious person. And indeed, what happened in 1970, an unpopular Labour leader lost to the Tories. So that is the example Wes Streeting should be wary of. And if he is a true revisionist, he will move.
Michael, I don't want to paint you as a master plotter or anything. I know you eschew that kind of thing. But what would you be...
Retired.
He's reformed, yeah.
What do you imagine would happen?
Well, I think that Patrick is right. The principle has been established as a sort of maxim in British politics that he who wields the dagger never wears the crown.
But sometimes they do.
But actually, the most successful example of courage being rewarded and fortune favouring the brave was Margaret Thatcher in the immediate aftermath of Heath's defeat. And the key lesson of Starmer is an absence of all of the qualities that one associates with leadership: boldness, vision, consistency, a capacity to rally people behind you. So that is, if anyone does want to take over, what they have to display in the next couple of days.
One thing I think is very interesting is, speaking of revisionism, is the return of Gordon Brown to the fray in some kind of global envoy for finance. I mean, I thought that was the Chancellor, but, you know, that's in the old society. Gordon's now back, sort of helping his protégé Rachel Reeves, Harriet Harman back to help of Sky podcast fame, but in the rest of her life as a senior Labour figure, very much, you know, adored by a certain wing of the party because obviously of her trailblazing role as a woman. Now she's back to help on the violence against women and girls agenda. But I think this is also a way that Keir Starmer is sort of circling the wagons as if you come for me, you're coming for these people who you revere. It's a certain part of the Labour Party that, let's say, and it tends not to be the Blairite bit, that really reveres Gordon Brown and Harriet Harman. That is a very clear defensive... If you look at the chessboard, he's very kind of focused on defensive play. But it does, to both Patrick and Michael's points, just to conclude, Trevor, it does make it difficult to say you are leading if you're only doing it by being surrounded by others.
We will carry on with this conversation in a moment. The overwhelming defeat of Labour in Wales, its founding heartland, was probably the most devastating result of the night for the party. Plaid Cymru is now the largest party in the Senedd, and my next guest will become the Welsh First Minister. Plaid leader Rhyn ap Iorwerth, and I spoke to him a little earlier. Rhyn ap Iorwerth, congratulations. I imagine you expect to be First Minister in a few days. Have you done the deal with other parties yet?
I spoke very clearly throughout the campaign about my desire to be able to be in a position where Plaid Cymru could form a minority government. I think the maths, the way people voted and the way the seats were shared out in that momentous election on Thursday makes it clear now that we are in that position. It does mean, of course, having to move forward as a minority government in a cooperative way. I've spoken very openly about the fact that my politics is something that I see as being necessarily cooperative. I've spoken, of course, with other party leaders, and we now look forward to getting to work on behalf of the people of Wales.
Your principal opposition is going to be reform. That's a completely new situation. How do you expect to work with them?
You're right. This is a new political party that will be trying to find its feet here in the Senedd. We have a strong mandate, I think, to form that minority government here. We have a clear vision as a prospective government here of the way we want to go about our business here. The priorities that we have set out for many, many months now around health and education and job creation and childcare, and of course standing up for Wales. We of course expect there to be robust opposition. The opposition parties will be working out themselves how they propose to take that opposition to us. But our focus will always be on what we can do in order to change things, in order to move forward on those issues important to people's lives. And it's not just going to be a matter of dealing with opponents and opposition. It will necessarily be having to reach out to others on a host of different issues, as we intend to do so positively over the next 4 years.
Well, one other point about the opposition, and I think for people outside Wales, it may be a bit hard to understand how seismic this change has been. Labour's been the dominant force in Welsh politics for a century. Now, aside from your great policies and your general campaigning brilliance and all of that, which let's take that for granted, what do you think caused the collapse of the Labour vote?
I will take your generous comments in the spirit I'm sure they were intended to be taken. But it has been a collapse. It has been a collapse that we could sense coming, that we could see coming. And in the build-up to the election and into the many conversations I've had since, people have been explaining to me why. People had lost trust in the idea that one party running everything was the best thing for Wales. They saw in Plaid Cymru a new energy, a new set of ideas, a new set of people with a higher level of ambition for our nation. They had always liked us and respected us, but for whatever reason hadn't made that step to giving us a vote in an election. They felt ready to, and that disillusionment with both Keir Starmer and his actions in government since July 24, and the failure of Labour in Wales to stand up to that indifference from Downing Street led us to a penny drop moment, I think, in Wales. Labour will now have to reflect on what on earth went wrong. I will reflect on how we use this moment as a moment of huge significance for the future, the history of Wales.
Well, let's talk about your agenda rather than everybody else's. You're quite right to raise that. Can we just get one thing clear? Independence is not at the top of your agenda.
Well, Wales is on top of my agenda, and that's the key thing. And it's been great to engage in many conversations over the course of this election on the question of independence and what this election meant for independence. And I said this election isn't about independence, in that there is no proposal by myself or Plaid Cymru to put a referendum on the table. I don't think we're there yet, and I've spoken, if you like, not from a policy position, but that's my belief. If we are to, redesign our nation and redesign Britain, in order to be able to have a system that works, that that people can believe works for them, we have to take people with us. But it is about the future of Wales. I don't believe that our lot now is as good as it can get. We need to move forward with more powers for this Parliament. But the powers in this Parliament are powers for the people of Wales. And then we make the case for where we can take this journey constitutionally and why.
You say it's about the future of Wales, but a lot depends on the relationship with Westminster. When we last spoke, you were telling me that you were planning to spend the reserves that are made available to you by Westminster. From your manifesto, you want to raise taxes on Welsh people, borrow some more money. How do you expect those things to happen without Westminster agreeing to it?
And that's one of the issues that, at the core of this seismic shift in Welsh politics, the belief of the people of Wales that they want a party in government here that's ready to stand up for Wales and make the case. And it's not a matter of I now ask and I get everything right. What more money will flow when the powers? But what they expect is for the case to be made and for the case to be built. Now, I expect, on becoming First Minister, to be beginning immediately on those negotiations with the UK Prime Minister. And the difference between me doing that and my predecessor in Labour doing that will be that I will not accept no. I take that initial no, and then we make the case as a nation for why we need to move forward. And I've said all along that Labour have two choices now. They can punish Wales, if they like, and say, right then, you're not getting anything. Or they can say, we have shown our indifference in our actions. We need to change our position on what UK government does for Wales. I will help that UK Prime Minister, whoever that is, in coming months. Okay. To see Wales in a different way, to see our needs in a different way, to understand our aspirations as a nation and why it's up to UK government to step up to the mark. But on that question of independence, yeah, I want Wales to be an independent country, but we work with what we have now.
Rhena Arworth, congratulations again, and thank you so much for your time this morning. Back to our panel, Michael and Patrick. Michael, the thing, loss of Wales for Labour is just an absolutely shattering blow. But it is, if you like, the most spectacular example of the way that the country has, in a way, fragmented. There are now 5 parties in contention, plus the nationalists in Wales and Scotland. And by the way, London's turned out to be a completely different country to the rest of England and Wales and Scotland. What has this election told us about the country, never mind parties?
Well, not only do we now have a multi-party system, as you say, 5, 6, 7 parties, but we also have different types of contests in different parts of the country. So in Tottenham, it's Labour versus Green. In Essex, it's Conservative versus Reform. In Surrey, it's Lib Dem versus Conservative. There are specific microclimates across the whole country. And we've had something similar in the past when we've had the rise of the Liberal Democrats. But the way in which each specific contest pits broadly, but not always, an establishment party against an insurgent party, or a party of the left against a party of the right, changes the choices for people on the ground.
My colleagues who love a pithy phrase are talking about balkanisation of Britain, Anne.
Well, having spent time in the Balkans, it was a bit more fiery there, must be said. But what they mean is, as Michael's pointing out, different microclimates, different sort of places where races just turn out differently. I mean, London's a great example of that. It really does like it could be for the politics of an entirely different country. That said, not only in the way that we often think, oh, London is progressive. London, at least inner London, was much more anti-Brexit than lots of the rest of the country. But we saw the Conservatives coming back in the so-called donut around the edges of London quite successfully. And as soon as you get to the edge of London, and Michael knows as a former Surrey MP, it just falls off and the appeal is not there. So it does appear not just balkanisation, but certainly a much stronger trend, perhaps between urban centres and other places and small towns and counties voting very differently. And then you could go to an entirely, I come from near Newcastle, and you look at the state of Newcastle, where Labour managed to field 2 councillors. And you can see there, you can really see what you could call a balkanisation, right, with Reform, Lib Dems, Greens doing well, Labour absolutely nowhere.
And there are phenomenal, unusual results, for example, like Birmingham, it's not entirely clear how the largest local authority in Europe is actually going to be governed at the moment.
Yeah, it looks like a Dutch or Belgian parliament or something, and this is the problem. We now have European-style politics, be that the politics of local grievance, the politics of, ethnic or localised representative parties, right-wing populists, a sort of embattled centre, with a sort of Liberal Party whose politics nobody can quite understand, sort of floating in the middle, always resilient. But with the exception of Wales, of course, which now has a purely proportional system, all of this is mediated unpredictably through a very British electoral system in first past the post. So it is almost the worst of both worlds. We have a party system that is not fit to be mediated or to be weighed up through our electoral system, and it's going to be a complete mess.
Of course, this is a very good point, because actually everybody in government is now going to have to get used to the idea of working in coalition. Now, we've had one coalition recently. Hold that thought, because we can now actually go to one of those parts of the world that's changed, and that's Scotland, where the SNP are the largest party, but they don't have an overall majority. I can now speak to the SNP's Stephen Flynn. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Trevor. Good to see you again.
Now, congratulations. I gather you're going to leave us in Westminster because you've got a seat in Holyrood. John Swinney said that you'd want a referendum on independence if you got an SNP majority. You don't have an SNP majority, but you do have a pro-independence majority in the Parliament. Are you going to demand a fresh referendum?
I think it's perfectly reasonable based upon the result of the election, where, as you've quite rightly highlighted, we now have more pro-independence MSPs coming into Holyrood than ever before, to make clear to Westminster that the people of Scotland should have the chance and the opportunity to decide their own future, to look at broken Brexit Britain or look at a hopeful, aspirational, independent Scotland which can grow its economy, use its energy wealth to the benefit of the people who live here, and be a prosperous place for our young people. And it's not just in Scotland where that is very much on the table. I was listening to Reen, who's the likely incoming First Minister in Wales. We're obviously aware of the fact that Michelle O'Neill is the First Minister in Northern Ireland too. The constitutional landscape within the UK has been shattered, and it's time for Westminster to wake up to the reality that they now face.
OK, so what I'm hearing there is that you are actually going to call for an independence referendum. And are you going to be encouraging your peers in Cardiff and in Belfast also to call for separatist referendums, so that you become essentially the leaders of movement to break up the United Kingdom?
Separatist is such a negative word, Trevor. We're nationalists who believe in a prosperous, welcoming, independent Scotland, and I'm sure that
Goodness me.
I know. I'm sure your viewers will be shocked, Trevor. No, look, it's for the people of Wales to determine their future. It's for the people of the north of Ireland to determine their future. And it's for the people of Scotland to determine their future. And as you've highlighted, there is a high number of independents supporting MSPs in Holyrood, now a record-breaking number of independents supporting MSPs in Holyrood. And I think it's only right that Whitehall wakes up to that reality. But if I may also just reflect upon the fact that for very many months, people were saying that the SNP were not going to achieve a victory, and when in actual fact, we have achieved a landslide. When John Swinney took over as the First Minister of Scotland, we were projected to get 35 seats within the Parliament. We got 38% of the vote, far in excess of anything that Keir Starmer achieved at the last general election. That's testament to the leadership of John Swinney. The public have put their trust in him, they've put their trust in us. It's now time that Westminster put their trust in the people of Scotland to allow them to decide their own constitutional future.
Can I just ask you, in a sense, a procedural question, are you going to rule as a minority administration, or are you going to aim to create a formal coalition? I mean, if you did so with Labour, you would have an automatic majority. you'd have to bring the Lib Dems and Greens to have a majority with them. But what are you going to do?
Well, that'll be for the First Minister to determine. I think you'll have noted that yesterday he made clear that he's going to invite all political leaders into Butte House for a conversation with him, all bar, of course, the Reform Party, because we will have nothing to do with Nigel Farage's toxic populist hard-right politics. But all those other parties will be invited in for discussion to see if we can find common ground, and then I'm sure on the back of those discussions the First Minister will be able to set out what his intentions are to the people of Scotland, and it's absolutely right that John has the ability to do that.
Just as a matter of interest, many Scots voted for Nigel Farage's party, and you've just described it in, let's call it, disobliging ways. Is that how a democracy should work, that some people, a party that has been, that represents a significant section of the Scottish people, is treated as a leper?
In fairness, I think all I've done there is be absolutely accurate in describing the Reform Party as hard-right and populist. Now,
you'll have to deal with the libels, but I'm just asking: is it reasonable to say to that section of Scottish society that, whether you think it's right or not, voted for Mr Farage's party, that they are basically shut out of the possibility of wielding influence in Scotland's government?
Yes, because more people voted for the Scottish National Party than did for Nigel Farage's party. Thank goodness for that. And as such, we will be able to be the ones who set the direction within the Scottish Parliament itself. But if I may, in relation to reform, there are people who voted for reform who have repugnant views. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But there is another group of people who voted for reform because they're angry. They're understandably angry about the fact that society hasn't been working in the way that they want it to. There hasn't been economic growth, there hasn't been opportunity, and many of the things that they rely upon in day-to-day life haven't worked in the way that they want. And you know, it's my job and it's everyone else's job in Parliament not to chastise those people, but to win those people back into the centre ground of Scottish politics, where they understand that politicians are working for them and they don't feel or see the appeal of the populist hard right that Nigel Farage promotes.
Stephen Flynn, once again, congratulations, and thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Trevor.
Well, let's come back to Westminster now. And the immediate drama this morning is that the Labour MP, Catherine West, says that if the Cabinet does not act to make Keir Starmer resign, she will trigger a leadership contest. And that's causing chaos in the party. And we can speak live to Catherine West now. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning, Trevor. Hope you're well. I'm
chipper as ever. Full disclosure, for quite a long time, until I was a constituency, so one of your constituents. But let me just put to you, first of all, what we heard from Bridget Phillipson this morning, who was very nice about you, said you were great friends, but actually you're completely wrong.
I respect Bridget, but what I want the Cabinet to do is to close themselves into a room today and come up with somebody who they can all get behind, which would mean we wouldn't have to have a leadership election. And if that can happen, then we can have a very quiet transition without upsetting anybody, without having to go to all of the members, and we could have that. Now, I'm a very fair person. The Prime Minister is going to actually respond tomorrow, which is nice of him because the election was on Thursday and tomorrow's Monday, and I would have expected a response earlier than this. But once I've listened carefully to what he says, I will be demanding a timetable for an orderly transition, and the chair of the party has to take this request seriously because we've only really got 2 years to turn around the Labour message, to get it out there and to win back working people and to give them confidence that the Labour Party is on their side.
Well, let me just, if I may, bring you up to date on one thing. Bridget Phillipson, I said to her, when is the meeting of the Cabinet going to happen? And she said, there will be no meeting of the cabinet. We are not going to do this. So I think you can forget the idea that the cabinet is going to come anywhere near what you want it to do, and which means that tomorrow you're going to have to, you're basically going to have to decide what you're going to do. What are your thoughts now?
I think that level of Trevor, if I could just say, that level of inertia in the face of the election defeat that we saw on Thursday is a disgrace. Working people sent us a message on Thursday. We have to listen to that and we have to change. And we have to do it quickly. We have to lay out a timetable and we have to turn this ship around so that by the time we come to face reform, this is a party that gets given £5 million for doing nothing except being reform. There's so many questions we have about that party. We need to take them on. We need to prove that we deserve to lead this country, that we have got fairness at our heart, and that we're not thinking about ourselves as cabinet ministers or ourselves as MPs, but we are putting working people first. That is our first duty, to serve the people of this country. That is why the Labor Party was formed, to serve working people. And I want to see a little bit more grit from the members of the cabinet to hold to account the leader, to get round that cabinet table, to close that door and to elect a leader so that we don't have to go through a leadership election.
Are you saying...
if the Prime Minister's speech is not up to scratch tomorrow, and I'm very fair, I will listen to the Prime Minister's speech, but if it's not up to scratch tomorrow, then I'm afraid I will have to take action, which means emailing my colleagues from the Parliamentary Labor Party to request their support and getting the 81 names which are necessary.
I should also tell you that I have probably one of the great experts on the Labour Party and its doings in the studio with me, Patrick Maguire, and he says that you don't need the 80 to start a process. You may need 80 to get on the ballot, but the minute you tell the party authorities that you want to challenge the leader, it will start. Are you really ready for that?
I'm a fair person. I want to give the chair of the party, who is a friend of mine, an opportunity to take control and to provide a timely timetable so that we can all have a secure knowledge about when we will have a new leader of the Labor Party to take us into the next very difficult 2 years, facing up to a new electoral threat. It's no good asking our people like Gordon Brown, Harriet Harman, who I adore, but we've got to be more energetic and we've got to modernise, and we need a fresh approach to take on this electoral threat. And that's why I do not believe that we are taking this seriously. Can we really let all of today go and not just ask for a change? So that is my polite request to the chair of our party, that she lay out a very clear timetable so that we can all be secure that we can expect a second term of government by winning the next general election, but recognising that that takes 2 years to turn around our machinery, to mend the relationship with the civil servants, to get the machinery of government working, and also to appoint some really good communications people who can at least put a glove on Nigel Farage.
Forgive me, Catherine, we've got to move on, but just before we leave you, it looks like you're going to go for it. If there is going to be a new leader, who do you want it to be?
That is not for me to say. That if the Cabinet cannot agree, then the membership will be forced into a leadership election. And if that happens, then it will be the members' decision as to who they choose. But I would say to the women of the Parliamentary Labor Party, don't think somebody else is going to do it. Get behind a good woman, because we have to think outside the box. We have to be very creative and innovative, and we have to take the fight to reform.
I think Angela Rayner will have heard your message loud and clear. Catherine West, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's get a quick reaction from our panel, Michael, Anne and Patrick.
Look, I think that was a pretty bracing interview from Catherine West. She, didn't hit the ball and miss, did she? I think the most striking thing there is she is speaking very authentically for a huge number of Labour backbenchers who, for several months, have looked at the Cabinet and thought, do you really like your ministerial cars and ministerial boxes so much that you can't see the problem staring us in the face, that you can't see what's about to happen on the 7th of May, and lo, what came to pass on the 7th of May? I think the scenario she outlines, whereby the Cabinet are going to get into a room and decide this by committee, ain't going to happen, not least because if you get the Cabinet in a room, at least half of them will be thinking, well, it can't be them, it may as well be me. And, you know, some of the names I could tell you, some implausible people will be thinking that it could be them.
Do share.
Oh, look, no, I wouldn't want to...
Darren Jones.
Well, no, these people, I'd like them to pick up the phone to me, to continue picking up the phone to me. So whoever you think it is, it's not you. But I think, look, it does sound like she, on Monday, will set this process in train.
Very quickly, a few seconds.
Yeah, the inertia point, I think that landed with me very much so, that kind of the charge is not only were you in denial before for the reasons Patrick laid out, but you have failed to respond since Thursday to the seriousness of the situation. And I'm afraid that captures an emotional truth.
Michael?
I thought that Catherine West gave a very good and measured account of herself, and it's clear, as you pointed out, that she would like Angela Rayner to be the Prime Minister.
Well, we'll see. In just a moment, we'll hear from the Reform UK Deputy Leader, Richard Tice.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on.
I'm Yalda Hakim. 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 I'm Yalda Hakim.
Just to let you know that we will be hearing from Liberal Democrats and so on later on in the day. But anyway, we're coming back to this weekend. The Conservatives took big losses, as expected, in the elections this week, but they will have taken heart from some of the numbers and a couple of key wins. A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Housing Secretary, James Cleverly. James Cleverly, you've got a couple of councils back in England, but your vote share's halved. You're down from 31 to 12 seats in Holyrood. You're in 4th place in Wales. Not much for you to crow about after Thursday, is there?
Well, it was in a number of places a disappointing result. It's always painful when you lose good colleagues, whether they be in Wales, Scotland, or in local councils across England. And you know, that's something we take seriously. But we've also got to recognise that the figures that you quoted there were measured against a post-COVID vaccine high point. We've made ground since this time last year, whereas Reform, for example, have a lower share of vote than they did this time last year. We know there's a lot of work to do, but we are heading in the right direction. And amongst those results, we regained Westminster Council. We're now also in control of Wandsworth Council. We retained London Borough of Bexley, which was a Reform target. It is a mixed picture.
All right.
But we can absolutely see our road back to government, both nationally and locally.
I think, though, one thing that seems to have changed for me about this is that you aren't competitive in parts of the north at the moment. You're being trounced in the east of England. You're in 4th place in Scotland and Wales, as I said. Your leader's essentially now the junior partner to Mr Farage. Something has changed in the country. Is it time for you just to start recognising the reality and accept that you're going to have to do some kind of deal or some kind of understanding with Farage?
Look, the way people vote in local elections is very different to the way people vote in national elections. And I know we all do this. We all do this every set of local elections. Yeah, where people say, if this was replicated, but it never is replicated.
Oh, I don't think that's entirely true. And you always say that. But this was really a very big test. And actually, the point I've just made was better demonstrated in local elections, that actually there are parts of the country in which you are not competitive. Isn't it time you just started to recognise that?
So we go into every election with a plan to win those elections. And I think going into an election with some future deal at the back of your mind is really, really counterproductive. So we will present a Conservative agenda to the British people, ensuring the economy gets back on track, leaving the ECHR so we can control our borders and take proper control of our laws, supporting businesses, making sure that we support the people that work rather than people who are just seeking a life on benefits. That is a Conservative agenda. We will put that forward, and I think that as we come to future elections, that will be increasingly popular. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to reinforce some of the talking points of other political parties, because, of course, they want to talk down our chances. But the numbers are demonstrating we're heading back in the right direction under Kemi, and that actually, and a really, really big point on this, whether it's the Greens or Reform, what we've seen where they have been elected is they really struggle to actually govern. And the election result is not the end of the process, it's the start of the process.
Well, let me ask you about that.
And this time next year, I think we'll be having a very different
let me ask you about that, because tomorrow morning, councillors are going to be sworn in. Mm-hmm. And in some places, there's a large number of councillors have gone into no overall control. What are you telling your councillors? Are you going to forbid them from forming coalitions with Reform locally?
We're not going to do coalitions with Reform or other political parties. Well,
you have done before. What suddenly changed?
Well, because what we're not going to do is we're not going to help other political parties damage the local area. And you look at places like Kent, where Reform have taken control.
No, stop. Because you've had coalitions with Lib Dems, you've had coalitions with others locally. Are you now saying that you're going to tell your local councillors, if they can form a stable administration with Reform councillors, that they may not do so?
Our plan is to make sure that we protect the people of the country from bad government. And we do that by holding the government to a... No, but,
yeah, but does that preclude... Does bad government mean working in coalition with Reform or not?
Well,
Are you forbidding them or not?
So our position has been the same as it's been in every election, which is, depending on local circumstances, and it's impossible for me to play out every particular scenario, but we've always said that local Conservative leadership needs to check in with the party, essentially. We're not going to prop up administrations that do what they did in Worcestershire, for example, by putting up council tax by 9% or massively increasing the councillor allowance.
But you keep using this as an opportunity to tell me how awful Reform is, rather than telling me what...
Because that is true.
That's fine.
And look,
you told me that 3 times.
And I don't want my party,
but you're not telling me yes or no. So what I'm getting is...
No, it's like the default position is...
You will go into coalition with Reform.
No, Trevor, the default position is no. The default position is no.
OK, that's clear. Let me ask you about something very straightforward about you. London mayoralty is coming up. One of the consequences of what we saw on Thursday is that it seems that London is no longer a red city and there are opportunities. And some people think that under the new voting system that's coming in London, the Tories could have a serious chance. And that you would be the candidate to deliver that chance.
Well, that's... Having your name put forward, having your name discussed around things like this it's very flattering. And I've said, you know, I've been really consistent on this, and my name has been talked about a number of times over the last couple of sets of elections. Look, London is too important to just lazily disregard it and just say, no, I'm not interested, because it is really, really important. And of course... both when I was chairman of the party, now I'm involved as a shadow local government secretary, making sure that we as a party take London seriously and get it right is a really important precondition for future success. So, of course, that is something we think about, I think about. But the simple truth of the matter is that there is a fantastic job that I've got as the MP for Braintree. I love that. No, look, and I love that. And the really easy thing to do is what a lot of politicians do, which is to say, never, 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 and then 6 months later go, oh, I changed my mind. OK,
so, but if the city called, you might be available. One last very quick question. There's people are saying that there's chaos in Labour, rather reminiscent of some years that you experienced in Conservative administration. What advice have you got for Labour MPs right now?
Well, look, it took us 10 years before we really got into that bloodlust of deposing sitting prime ministers. The Labour Party seemed to have done that in less than 2 years, so very impressive pace there. Look, my opinion is when you realise, as we did with Liz, when you realise that you've got a prime minister that is not going to be a credible proposition going into a general election, the best thing to do is to remove that person, which is what we did when it was obvious that Liz was not going to work. I think the Labour Party needs to grow a backbone and make a decision, either keep him or ditch him.
Jump now. James Cleverly, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Cheers.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation.
So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Reform were the big winners across the United Kingdom, piling up huge numbers of councillors in England, plus an extraordinary strong performance from a standing start in Scotland, and also, of course, advancing in Wales. I can now speak to their deputy leader, Richard Tice. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, Trevor.
I can see your smile. You're now going to actually have to do the job, aren't you? What are you telling your people, particularly about relations with Conservatives? You're in lots of places where there's no overall control. You're going to have to do some coalition building, aren't you?
Well, the first thing you should be saying, Trevor, is congratulations. Congratulations to Nigel.
I do beg your pardon.
To his candidates. Well, that's fine. Thank you so much, because what Nigel and our brilliant candidates and councillors have achieved is truly remarkable. We have delivered a political earthquake. And do you know what voters have done? In their millions, Trevor, they've said we want more reform, because we started running majority councils, 9 of them May 25. We've done a great job so far. Voters have looked at it and they've doubled down. They said we want many more councils run by reform councillors who've got a track record of success, getting stuff done, and they say we want more reduction of SEND backlogs, more potholes filled using brilliant, glorious new British technology. They want more investment in better valued children in care in places like Country. So yes, we accept the serious responsibility, Trevor, but I believe we're up to it. And of course, it'll be about hard work, roll your sleeves up, get stuck in, get stuff done. And we've already started those meetings this weekend.
Okay, let's just get, I mean, I've already lavished praise on you and said how wonderful you are and all the rest of it. So let's get past that point and let's talk about the actual politics of this. And you carefully swerved the question I asked you. You've got 1,450 seats. You're not in a majority in all of those, in fact, most of them. Are your people going to be allowed to enter coalitions with the Conservatives?
Trevor, your research is totally wrong. We've won a majority in 14
let's not do that.
councils. We're the largest party. Trevor, if you... Yeah, I'm getting to that, but if you're going to quote facts, please quote them correctly. You're wrong. We're a majority in 14. We're the largest party in another 9. And of course, our councillors will do what needs to be done in order to work brilliantly for the residents in all of those councils across the board. But, you know, whether it's Sunderland, Gateshead, St Helens, all the way down, you know, we've repainted the Red Wall a bright, optimistic turquoise. We've repainted the Tory shires of Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex. And yes, there's hard work. We're not afraid of that. And we'll do what is necessary, applying common sense, business-like approach to getting stuff done and making good decisions. That's what voters want us to do.
Forgive me, I'm going to give it one more go because, you know, we've had this kind of conversation many times. We can have an argument about numbers and you can give the campaign a speech again. I've just asked you a very simple question. In places where there are coalitions possible that would put reform in the place where it can wield power, and by the way, we could have an argument about your track record and how great it is or not, but just answer the question, are you going to instruct your people that they may not enter coalitions with the Conservatives?
Trevor, we're not doing coalitions, we're doing common sense politics, working with people across the whole spectrum, independents, whatever, in order to try and get stuff done, because that's what voters have asked us to do. They haven't asked us to enter into coalitions, they've asked us to save money and deliver better value and better services. Crucially, they've doubled down, they've said we want more reform, not less reform. More common sense, more business-like approach, get stuff done.
All right,
does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, forgive me, it's taken us a little bit of time to get to something like an answer.
Well, I wanted to enjoy the moment of congratulation and celebration.
I did want to ask you about... Yeah, we don't do celebrations here. I did want to ask you about tax bans and all of that, but let me just get straight to the point which I know a lot of our viewers are interested in, and I know you're irritated by the many questions that are being asked about Nigel Farage's £5 million gift. I also know he didn't have to declare it, so you don't have to tell me that, and you'd have to be a monk or a moron to turn down £5 million. I get all of that, but you might ask, what does a donor expect for £5 million? What does Christopher Harborne expect from Nigel Farage?
Zero. Zip. Niente.
So he
nothing.
Oh, so if I ring him up and I say, can I have £5 million for no reason at all, I stand a chance?
Look, Trevor, you can ask you can ask whoever you want. That's your prerogative. I just know that Nigel is his own man. He is a strong man, and no one can buy anything with regard to Nigel. His convictions, his principles are absolutely rock solid to save this great country. And do you know what? Voters have heard all of this, and they've said, we want more Nigel, not less Nigel.
He says that it was a gift. He's very switched on, and he knows that this will become an object of controversy. Why didn't he ask for it to become a donation to the party rather than to him personally? And then it would go through the normal kind of process, and he wouldn't be accused of enriching himself.
Because, Trevor, this gift was made to Nigel to look after his safety and security primarily before he decided to come back into British politics. And do you know what? Millions and millions of British people are delighted, are grateful, as am I, for that incredible generosity, unconditional gift, which will hopefully keep Nigel safe and secure in a state that has consistently refused to protect Nigel.
Richard Tice, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, back to Michael and Patrick. Well, as I said, he was doing the Cheshire Cat impression there. Do you think that they... I mean, obviously, it was a fantastic night for them, and they have every right to be cheerful. But do you think that there's a slight sense creeping in there that they're actually going to have to do the job?
I think they know that they have to do the job. I think what's happened in Kent, you know, they took over the council there. There'd been quite a lot of sort of rock and roll on their decisions and their implementation. But I think if I'm giving to be fair to the Richard Tice position, I do think that message has got home. So they're trying to upskill very quickly in terms of bringing people on board they think will be able to help them. But it's quite hard to do. And also you've got this very broad sweep, a quite diffuse sweep of people who will come in as councillors. Some of them will be keen to learn, and some perhaps will just say, well, you know, it's my way or the highway. And that is often the way that reform operates. It's very strongly engineered around individuals. So I think that is a question. I think the other question that might, you were being rejoice, as the great lady once said. You were being enjoined to rejoice there, Trevor, whether you refused to join in childishly. But there is also a sense, I think, if you look at some places as well, around London as well, where their result was actually softer. They did very, very well. But I think we're still in a territory where, without some tie-up on the right, it's still harder to see them getting to number 10. They wouldn't want to hear that today.
Michael?
Well, Reform did very well, but I think that as we get closer to the election... Oh, sorry. The challenge for Reform is, can they convincingly... That's Nigel on the line. Can they...
OK, Michael, are you thinking about...
No. Can they convincingly say we're sufficiently different? So in that interview, you pinned Richard Tice in a way which reminded me of so many people, I was one myself, conventional politicians, dodging the question, dodgy donations, and a denial of some of the dilemmas that they face. The appeal, as Patrick has written, of Reform at its highest is we're different. We are the machine that will destroy the establishment. The closer they look or seem to the establishment, you know, bouffon-haired businessmen dodging questions from you, then they're more challenging for them.
A big question to end with, Patrick. The argument in Labour is, who's the bigger threat, Reform or Greens? After this week, what would you say?
Well, the problem is Labour is losing to everyone, everywhere, in every possible way. So that argument is hard to settle. They're losing more votes to the Greens in raw numbers, but they've lost more seats to Reform. And the loss of places like Barnsley, Wakefield, all the other, great industrial centres that once belonged to Labour, it's going to be an impossible argument to resolve, and it gets to the heart of the cultural issue with the Labour Party.
Thank you all. Next week, we'll be back Sunday, 08:30. Who knows? We might be covering a contest.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?